Well, first up today, the Mayo Clinic says temper tantrums are a normal part of growing up. But ask any parent and they'll probably tell you they feel anything but normal when it happens. Well, let's get real. Temper tantrums can be a real pain. These rages might involve whining and crying, screaming, kicking, hitting, even breath holding.
And you turn blue. So today, what do temper tantrums really mean? How can you manage them or even prevent them? Is it possible? Carol Mazias is a social worker, contributor to Metro Parent Magazine. Great to see you this morning.
Thanks for being here.
Nice to see you guys.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You know, I remember temper tantrums. If you see other parents and their kids throwing a temper tantrum, you just instantly feel sorry for them. But they're actually very freaky as a parent because it's like you don't know your own kid because they're flipping out.
Right. Well, that's one thing. I mean, I think as a parent, you should not feel like, oh man, I'm doing a horrible job. I'm a terrible parent. Tantrums happen all the time, and like you see kids all the time crying and screaming, and it's nothing to worry about. As a parent, you're doing a fine job.
Yeah, see, you do feel like that as a parent,
Right.
like I must be doing something wrong because I've got a child who's throwing a temper tantrum, but the Mayo Clinic says it's a natural part of growing up.
Yeah, I think that kids, when they're growing up, you have to deal with a lot of things, and a lot of the times you feel like you can't control every situation. Some kids, language is harder to develop, and they hear no a lot. And in response to all of that, sometimes you tantrum, like sometimes you get really upset. And so I think that parents need to learn productive ways to respond to their kids getting upset rather than getting really freaked out and putting it all on themselves and feeling like horrible parents.
Well, so much of the time, you know, I think of as a bystander, the child that freaks out at the register at a store. You know, they want the candy, they want the toy, whatever it is at the end, they kind of freak out there. So it's very public then at that point for a parent. So responding isn't always easy maybe to control because you're embarrassed, you're frustrated, and you want to actually deal with the kid properly. So how do you suggest that parents do deal and respond productively so that they're helping the child versus hurting the situation or making it worse?
Right. Well, I think that in public it's always a lot tougher because you just want to like sort of calm the situation right away and just like make your child be quiet, smooth it over. Yeah. I think though the best thing to do is when your child's in the middle of a tantrum, don't try to like settle them down. You have to take them out of the situation because even like adults, when we're all riled up and upset, you can't really reason with someone when they're upset. So if you're at a store, if you can, pay for your groceries, pay for your candy, don't give in to your child, don't give them what they want, and then just get them out of the situation. Walk out of the store. If you're in a restaurant, take them to the bathroom, take them to the car. Your child needs a moment, maybe two, to relax, to calm down, and then you can reason with them and then go back into the situation and try to, you know, respond to whatever it was that got them mad.
So the time to step in is not with when they're doing all the kicking, the yelling, the screaming, the flipping out part.
Yes, exactly. You can't really like respond productively.
You can't reason with them.
Yeah, a child, like an adult, like when you're upset, you can't be reasoned with. You're irrational, you're not thinking clearly. The situation needs to be mellowed and calmed down before you really can respond well.
What does it really mean? What do temper tantrums, what's the child saying with the screaming and the throwing themselves around and the crying?
I think a lot of times it can be frustration, it can be anger a lot of times if it's responding to no, responding to something, also loss of control, responding to something that they can't control. If you can't control a situation, it can make you really upset, and it's not easy when you're young and you're developing, your mind's still developing, your language isn't fully developed. It's hard then to respond in a way that I or you would by saying, you know, I think let's try this way, I think let's try this. It can be easy just to go to like yelling and crying. That's like an easier, I think, response for a kid.
So once the meltdown is cooled off and everything's sort of calm again, what's important to talk about at that point?
I think once everything's calmed down, I think you still need to address the tantrum. So why were you upset? If your child can express what it was that made them mad, try to look at, I like to say, an antecedent. So you have an ABC model, an antecedent. Something caused the child to be upset, which led to the B, the behavior. And then after, you can see what happened. So kind of like try to go back and see, was it that I said no? Is that what made you mad? And if that's what it is, then you need to talk with your child because they're going to hear no throughout their entire life. You can't like avoid the word no. So look at that. And then I think you need to figure out, like, we have two choices. Like, you got upset because of this. Do you want choice A? Do you want choice B? And then we can try to move forward.
Okay.
I also wonder if there's a way to prevent them in the first place. Because I think ideally you want them to be able to express frustration. But like you said, they don't always have the language. They don't have the verbal skills to say, well, I'm just really frustrated because I really want that toy, or I really want to have this play date with so-and-so, and I don't want to just go home or whatever. So I think they don't have it. But do you feel there's a way to prevent it?
Well, I think that's why it's important once a tantrum is done to not just forget about it, but to really talk about it and to figure out what was the reason that it happened. And then why was the reaction so strong? I mean, why was the whole tantrum? Why was there screaming? To figure out a more reasonable way. So if a child wants something and you're saying no, is there something you can do in the future to prevent the screaming? Offering a second choice that's almost as good as the first choice, or saying, well, we'll do this after we do something else. So if you really look at the tantrum and try to like dissect what it was that happened to cause it, then hopefully moving forward you can figure out ways to avoid it so it doesn't happen again.
Is there an age at which tantrums shouldn't really be happening anymore because they should have those skills, or they should be able to verbalize their feelings instead of act out? Because you think the younger you are, like babies and all those things, you cry when you're upset. That's just a natural part of that age frame. But as they get older, is there a point where tantrums just should not be happening anymore?
I think it's hard. I mean, yes, I want to say like by the age of X you shouldn't, but all kids are so different, and I think it would really freak out a parent to hear at this age they should not be happening anymore. So I mean, I think as a child's developing, if they're typically developed, if there's other developmental issues, like those can all come into play. But I mean, I think as your child's getting older, once their language is really developing and coming to full form, I think that's sort of when the tantrum should be stopping. But I don't think there's like an age, and I don't think that as a parent you should think, oh my God, my child just hit this age, like how are they still tantruming? This is awful. I think kids and adults all express themselves differently. I just think that when they're younger, you need to really work on it and really try to figure out how you can teach your child to respond in like a productive, like mature way, so they're not screaming and crying.
And maybe reward them the next time you go to the store.
Yeah, for sure.
And
for good behavior.
Respond, appropriately.
Yeah, for sure. Rewards are really good because when a child's acting in a great way, they should totally for sure be rewarded, I think.
Positive reinforcement.
Praise.
Thanks, Carol.
Nice to meet you.
Appreciate
Thank you so
it.
much
Thanks
for your
for
time.
meeting me too.